Hello, and welcome to the penultimate video looking at the history of Arion Games, or at least the 20 years. Maybe we'll do another one in 20 years' time, who knows? Today I want to look at where AFF second edition started. And it doesn't overlap with the 20 years of Arion Games. It predates Arion Games. So, AFF second edition. Obviously, it has its genesis in Fighting Fantasy, the introductory RPG, which was a cracking little book with a couple of adventures, the basic rules. But of course, we all know that that was really the rules from the Fighting Fantasy game books. Back then, they built on that with the Riddling Reaver. And the Riddling Reaver is a really good adventure, and I still hope to get this sorted out at some point. It had magic in, very much magic along the lines of Citadel of Chaos, so sort of Vancia magic. You have some spells, you can learn which ones you want to know each day, and when you cast them, they're gone for the day. But it also introduced the variable weapon damage. So a sword is 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Which is not really variable at all, of course, but a battle axe is 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, and a dagger is 1, 1, 2, and so on. That obviously was then built on to produce Dungeoneer and Alancia and Black Sand, which added in further magic, it added in priests, it added in various other bits. Interestingly, I was having a chat with Mark Gascoigne the other day, and the reason why Dungeoneer doesn't have any stats for armor, and I didn't know this until the other day, is down to artists like Russ Nicholson. And Russ drew almost everyone with scraps of armor and plate and chain and leather and so on. And his art style was very much different elements of armor all patched together. And that is why in the book it says heroes are assumed to wear a patchwork of armor. Now, I didn't know that, so that's quite interesting. But where did AFF start? Well, back then, in the late 80s, early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, I was a huge Final Fantasy fan. And so even back then, I was writing games, including this. So, quite old. Written on a word processor I had back then, an Amstrad word processor. And this was written in early 1990. So I was 17 doing my A-levels. And I love Fighting Fantasy and had these and so on, but I felt it didn't really scratch the itch that I was looking for. So I wrote this. And this I was reading through again this morning, and it's quite fascinating. So, quite a lot of chapters there. But what is interesting is we have classes. So, I was also playing a fair amount of D&D back then, second edition. So, I was obviously quite influenced by the class, the classes defining who you were. Interestingly, I don't think this is me, and I don't know who this is, but it's written a note, level restriction for race, ? Because we had different, could be a black elf, mountain elf, wood elf, gnome, etc. So, the various different classes, but what is also interesting is that I added some extra stats in, so strength, agility, and charm. And again, someone has written quite a lot of notes on that additional table, and that's not me, that's not my handwriting, so I don't know who that was, but someone's written need to be reviewed in great big letters. And so I don't know who did this, but I might have to try and find out, ask my gaming group. So we did put different stats in. They are still random, so a fighter still gets strength, skill D6 plus 5, a knight gets D6 plus 6, but a merchant only gets D6 plus 1. I don't know quite why you want to be a merchant, but hey-ho. Different stat bonuses for different races and so on. Otherwise, the mechanics actually are pretty much the same. Either roll under or roll over for opposed. because I wanted to keep it fighting fancy, and I do remember that much. But what is interesting is when we get to combat. So we've got different weapon damages, but these are more or less from Dungeoneer. So that wasn't anything new that I wrote. What is interesting from the modern AFF perspective, we've got different armors have different defense ratings, and the different defense ratings give you an armor roll. And if you have high agility, 7 to 12, you can dodge, and the dodge gives you a defense rating. So an agility of 12 plus, or more than 12, gives you the same armor rating as a breastplate. And shields add 1 to your armor rating. So you've got effectively there the same armor idea that I have in AFF 2nd edition, and that is where the armor in fact came from in 2nd edition. So you've also got sorcery magic, and there's a big table of all the sorcery spells. And that's pretty much the same as the effects of some of the spells are different, but that's pretty much the same as in AFF 2nd edition. You've got the sorcerer knows all the spells, they cast them, they lose stamina, they need components. So that's all pretty much the same. You've then got magecraft. So that is in the modern game wizardry, but it's somewhat different because it's based on Citadel of Chaos. So you've got spells like Creature Copy, ESP, Fire, Fool's Gold, Illusion, Levitation, Shielding, Strength. These are spells that you'll recognise from Citadel of Chaos, and it's Vancian in mechanics in that you know so many, depending on your magic rating. You learn them in the morning. Once you've cast them, they're gone. So that, again, is quite interesting because what I've done is I've taken sorcery magic from the sorcery game books, and I've taken wizardry magic, magecraft, from the Citadel of Chaos. And indeed, from Riddling Reaver, because that's how it works in there. What I've then done is I've put in a third type of magic, wizardry. Now, what is interesting is, it says here, wizardry is the hardest magic type to learn and use, but is potentially the most powerful. A wizard may create any effect he likes using raw magic, but due to the undisciplined nature of spells require more effort to gain the same effect. Causing a very likely effect, such as a candle blowing out, may be a grade 1 spell. Causing a house to rip itself out the ground and fly away may be a grade 12 or above. Now, what does that sound like? Oh, yes, Maelstrom. What I've done is I've taken the probability-based magic of Maelstrom and put it into AFF. And I've done that to give wizards in this iteration the flexibility to do almost anything they want. But again, like in Maelstrom, when you cast a spell, your magic stat goes down. So if you've got 8 magic and you cast a 4 difficulty spell, your magic goes down to 4 and comes back at 1 per hour. So it means that you can do almost anything, but casting a powerful spell knackers you. So you can cast lots of little spells or one big powerful spell per session. And it says class is recommended only if the GM is experienced, because obviously judging that can be difficult for a novice GM. Now, we then get to priests. Now, priests in here were wizards with a different name badge. It said priest rather than wizard. Priestly magic in this early iteration of 2nd edition means that you have certain powers, such as heal, cure poison disease, create food, water, smite, etc. Protection. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's the AFF 2nd edition powers. But wherever the page is, and it's not actually in that one for some reason, the priest of a specific god has certain specific powers. So a priest of Sindler goddess of luck and fate. Once per day, a priest must for one dice roll by the GM or a character to be re-rolled. The second roll is always kept. So priests had a specific power and some generic powers. Again, very much AFF second edition. We've got minor magic, and again, this is from Dungeoneer and is more or less poured straight across. An interesting thing, and this is something I did put in AFF, but not really in any great detail, is archmages. And this was the idea that once a spellcaster gets very powerful, they can become even more powerful. And what we've got is that if you learn one magic to 15 plus, so obviously we had the ability to, because there was no special skills, so you could take your magic past 15. But you could take another one, then you could start learning another one. And once you've got it at 1 plus, you become a master and you've got certain powers, like you can once per day choose double the effect of a spell and write scrolls. If you know 2, if you know sorcery and magecraft and you start to learn wizardry, you become a magister. If you learn sorcery and wizardry to a high level and start to learn magecraft, you become a magus. If you learn magecraft and wizardry to high level and then start to learn sorcery, you become an adept. And if you know all 3 at a high level, you become an archmage. And in a way, where I got that from was the Gary Gygax Dangerous Journeys, because in there's almost a table and says if you know this magic and this magic and this magic high, you're called this. And if you know this magic and this magic, you're called this, and so on. So I went for sort of the title based, but it was also a way to try and model the powerful archmages that do crop up in canon. So there's some various bits on equipment. We've got gods. We've got buying and selling, price lists, etc. And then I was reading through this one. I thought, oh, I don't remember doing that. Look at the bottom there. Herbs. All Hill, Base Mullein, Bishopweed, Bulrush, Colewort. It's the Maelstrom herb list. And that's also really interesting because I was obviously, when I wrote this, very influenced by 2 of the main games I was playing. I was playing a lot of D&D, and I was playing a lot of Maelstrom. And I was also wanting to create a new AFF because I loved AFF so much and Final Fantasy. So what I've done is I've brought in elements from different games. Now, is it copying? Yeah, but I mean, so much of creativity is influences from other sources. And obviously I loved the flexible magic of Maelstrom, so I wanted to bring it into AFF. And I think that's quite fascinating looking back at this now, because some elements of this have not survived to AFF second edition. The new stats, the classes, the freeform magic. Other elements have the armor, the priest abilities, sorcery, and so on. And I think that's quite fascinating because this was written in 1990, but then pretty much nothing was done with it apart from the unknown person who was reviewing it and trying to revise it. Nothing was done with it until 2010. Which is 20 years. Now, I did still have this, and I know I dug this out when I wrote this book. So I know that it influenced it, and I know I wanted to keep what bits I wanted to keep, what bits I didn't. Obviously, I was relatively young when I wrote that. Much more gaming experience when I wrote this, and writing experience. So there are elements that I knew just didn't work now, and I didn't want. But I think it is fascinating that I can still go back and look at this and I can see the lineage of how it got to this. And as you probably know, in my day job, I'm a viral immunologist. And when we look at viruses, you can look at which animals they came from and how they've jumped species and how they've gained this protein and that protein and this ability and that ability and so on. And you can look back and you can look at their history. You can look at their family tree. And in a way, that's what I've done here with this. The family tree of this is this to this as one lineage. That has then fed into the D&D, the Maelstrom, and so on to produce this. And then this down the line leads to this. So hopefully that was interesting. I'm going to do one more video towards the end of the sale, which has still got the celebration, which has still got a couple more days left. Hopefully that was interesting, and thank you for listening.